to usher in the messianic age. They don't mind if it's brought on by nuclear age. They are so sure of their ability to outlive the utility of their bodies. But just remember that was the last thought in the brain of every suicide bomber and every hijack plane. Follow the guidebook for an afterlife. Which one do I try? Which one?
Welcome to another episode of the Stay-at-Home Atheist podcast. I'm Jon, and I am the Stay-at-Home Atheist.
And I'm Stacey, and if you've been listening, you know what our mission statement is. It is to challenge antiquated views on family values, particularly those in line with religious and conservative perspectives, and to promote secular and forward-thinking alternatives.
Sorry for the little gap there. Her little paper with that on it just blew away in the middle of her talking, but she's done it enough that she mostly remembered. So before we get started with this episode, I'd just like to point out that our intro song is Afterlife by Shelley Siegel. You can check her music out at shelleysiegel.com or basically anywhere you can find music, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, whatever. I'm sure it's there. And the art and animation for our podcast is done by Phillip R. Gunter. Thank you once again, Colonel Phil. So with that out of the way, I guess we'll just jump into the news for this episode. Unless you've been living under a rock, you are aware that there has been a recent report concerning the Pennsylvania Catholic priest molestation scandal. Unfortunately, this is not a very happy topic, but it's kind of ripe for our show, and that's what we're going to talk about because that's what's in the news, right?
That's right. So if you haven't heard, they are accusing 300 Catholic priests across Pennsylvania of child abuse over 7 decades. They identified more than 1,000 children, and they know that there were many more beyond that that they could not identify. So, you know, this is unfortunately just a tip of that iceberg, which is disturbing.
The grand jury actually reviewed more than 2 million documents, including like secret archives, from the church.
Catholic Church.
I'd like to know how they got access to those, But it's very interesting what they've come up with. And in fact, I think the best way to kind of summarize what they found is by just verbatim reading this one quote from their report, because it's, I think, extremely impactful. So the report stated, priests were raping little boys and girls, and the men of God who were responsible for them not only did nothing, they hid it all for decades.
And, you know, this is when people who say, I don't know why atheists care if others believe in God, and religion is just a thing. It's something that we do to make ourselves feel good, or, you know, why are you trying to take something away? This is why. This is why religion is dangerous. People paid their tithes to the church, right? They gave them all this money. They sent their children there to be taken care of, and their children were harmed, and everybody ignored it
at every level too. And that's really the most damning part, and that's where I struggle with the difference between belief and religion. A belief does not exist in a vacuum, and there are harmful things that can come about just from belief, but there is a massive difference between believing something that is false and participating in an organization with
evil, terrible intentions.
Yeah,
it's just disgusting and disturbing that anyone would take advantage of that many children. You know, it is taking advantage of the children. It is taking away their childhood, because many of these children suffered for years and years and years and years. And these people will never pay a price for that. Yeah, they move them to another church, so they do it again to another set of kids, and they move them to another church. There's just nothing that ever happens except for, shame on you.
It actually made me think of, and you'll remember, I hope, because I can't remember the name of the Netflix special about that school. Keogh School.
In Pennsylvania.
Was that Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Wow. Was that called The Watchers or
something like that?
I apologize. We'll try to remember and throw it. But
great show.
But if you watch these adults now talking about the life, you know, that was their childhood, talking about the molestation, the rape, it has affected every level of their lives since then. And that's the thing. We know this kind of harm doesn't just stop when the abuse stops. It is a long-term mental degradation.
Well, and it's not just the sexual abuse, right? That's a piece of it.
Yes.
The other big piece here is This is your priest. This is the person who is supposed to protect you, who's supposed to make sure you go to heaven, because if not, you are going to rot in hell, and your life and your death is going to be miserable. So not only are these children living in fear, they're being tortured sexually and mentally, because it's not just a one-time molestation, right? It is an ongoing, they made these children feel like they must do this, or God would punish them, and that they were being punished for being terrible children. So there's this whole mental game and destruction, that happens in these situations, and which is why it's so much more disturbing to me. And I guess for me, the thing that I don't understand is, if you are a Catholic, I don't care what you believe, this kind of volume of destruction has to give you pause.
You would think.
If not, what the hell is wrong with you to not fucking care about 1,000+ children?
Well, and actually, let's be a little more clear here. It is not 1,000+ children. That is one investigation in one state. Actually, six
districts. One state,
yes.
6 districts. So maybe half the state? I don't even know if
no
it's that
idea,
much. But it's not even the whole state, and you have a Netflix show with other districts and even more. Like, it's just this compounding situation. And you have cases in some that have recently cropped up that if you go searching for the news around this, you'll find in Australia and some other places as well. This is not an isolated incident. This is a problem with the Catholic Church. And Pope Francis waited how many days to come out with a statement? And then his statement was all bullshit. And in the end, still said we need to pray and we need to fast to find a solution. Fuck that. You need to make somebody pay for their sins.
Well, and here's the thing. There's this whole... Actually, I'm going to plug a little bit here. Matt Dillahunty pretty recently made a really interesting video on his YouTube channel. You can find it just by typing in his name. I think it might be Sans Deity, but just type in Matt Dillahunty and you'll find it. And his video is about the idea that this is a kinder, gentler pope. And his basic conclusion is, yeah, sure, to an extent. And that's sort of what...
He just adds more fluff to his conversation.
Yeah, and of course his people come in behind him and fix all the, quote, mistakes he made or things that were misinterpreted or misunderstood. But here's the thing. If he really cared the way he claims to care about the children in these, that fall under priests and bishops in these archdioceses, if he really cared, then the first thing he would have done when he took over as pope, I don't know what the right terminology for that is he would have instituted an immediate Catholic Church-wide zero-tolerance policy where the first step is to contact local authorities, the second step is to contact the child's parents, the third step is to report it to your church leaders. Like, in that order. Yeah. But he didn't do that.
And he still really hasn't done that. His statement is super weak. It's super vague. It's all full of religious bullshit, and that we've made changes since 2002. And I'm sorry, if you're buying that, then you are just foolish. Because every statement that comes out is BS, and you damn well knew about it when your smoke signals went out and you were selected as the Pope or however that shit works. They just don't fucking care. But they're going to care because it is going to hurt their wallets. There have been lots of stories out there that donations are down. And, I think there are a lot of calls for different resignations with the current bishop and then the bishop who was serving during the time of the report. I think he's now in Washington, D.C. or somewhere else. And so there are calls for all these people to resign, which of course they're not going to because why would they? Nobody's going to make them. But because of that, there is some churn and they are losing some money, but not enough, which is disgusting.
You know what I'd love to see, and the difficulty is, it's probably never going to happen, but I would love to see like every tithing Catholic who disagrees with the church's position for all these decades of shuffling, or I said position, but policy, I guess, whether it's been written in stone or not, of shuffling around priests who have accusations against them. What I would like to see is all of these people to just say, we're not going to contribute until
it's fixed.
Definitive change has been made. And,
Yeah.
and here's the thing. At this point, kinder, gentler Pope my ass. That fix comes with a new Pope. It comes with new leadership at basically every level. There's really no way for the church to step up and say honestly that they've made a change when they still have people in places of power all throughout their organization who have contributed to this systematic silencing of victims, who have contributed to the shuffling of priests. And the thing is, I cannot fathom how any person who has ever even cared about another human being can look at what's gone on in the Catholic Church. And look, let's be clear, other religious organizations.
Oh, God,
it's not
yeah.
just the Catholics,
The
but
Catholics
they're
just the
the
worst.
standard one right now, right? And people who look at that and don't jump up and down out of their seats screaming for change are, I hate to say just as bad because they didn't molest a child,
But
it's real damn close.
Yep. They're condoning it. And the sad part is the fear is what keeps them there, right? The fear, and you know, it goes through everything. Everybody that's afraid of change and doesn't care enough about somebody else to move out of their own fearful place. The people that continue to give tithe to the Catholic Church are only doing it for themselves. They don't care about the kids that got molested. They couldn't give a shit less. They want to make sure they give their money because that's the only way they get into heaven. So if you believe in that, fuck you. That's probably a good place to stop. What do you think?
We might have to put in a content warning. I don't think we've sworn this much in a single episode. So
Very
I
frustrating.
might throw something in the write up for this episode about the discussion we're having. And look, if that's not for you,
Maybe not safe for work.
well, yeah, perhaps. Or just keep your earbuds in, and you'll be fine. So, I guess we'll just. You're right. There's really no good way to end that conversation. So let's just move on. This episode, we have a key discussion topic where we'd like to talk to you about setting expectations. I said that very weirdly. We will be talking about setting expectations. Stace, would you like to start with that?
Yeah, so, you know, we've talked a little bit about how we try to raise our children with respect for others and empathy and, you know, trying to educate them about the world and homeschooling and all that good stuff. And I think the kind of next logical conversation for us is kind of what we allow our kids to do that might be against the norm. You know, we want to teach them about things so they don't find out on their own in the wrong way with the wrong information.
Well, and I think when we kind of loop this back to the actual phrasing we decided for this topic, setting expectations, I think the best way to start talking about that is with language. And I think we might have touched briefly on this before. If not, then I just completely lost track of what we've talked about. But if so, you know, just bear with us a little bit. The thing is, I think teaching your children that some words are taboo doesn't actually teach them anything. Now, obviously, there are exceptions. So basically, the gist of what we've done is tell our children that we don't really care if they use traditionally what people call vulgar language or swear words in our home, so long as they understand the reasons why they shouldn't use them in public. A good example of that would be that other people will disagree with our decision and they don't want to see a 10-year-old in Walmart dropping F-bombs.
Yeah.
So we have taught them that they need to understand that there's a time and a place.
There are
and
boundaries.
Yeah, exactly. And these words don't really mean anything. The exceptions, of course, are when we talk about severe ableism, racism, sexism.
Words that are meant to hurt people.
Correct.
You want to say fuck, you want to say shit, that's fine. Because that's not a direct trigger to somebody, right? I'm not saying you're a terrible person. When we use words that are notoriously racist or ableist, then we have to have discussions about that. But we have discussions about that before they happen to hear it on the internet or accidentally say it because somebody else did. Because our whole point in setting expectations is if they understand the situation before they end up in it with a bunch of other teenagers that don't understand the situation, then we can make sure that when it happens, they're prepared and they help their friends whose parents may not be as comfortable with having those conversations. Language is just one piece of that pie, right? We have a teenage daughter. So, the whole drinking, partying, all that good stuff comes into play. And we've really, went down the path of, let's try to make sure you can be responsible with those things instead of ending up at a party and binge drinking and acting foolish. So we've let her learn about those things and make sure that she understands what it means.
I think the reality is, as a parent, you want your children to know that they can reach out to you when there's a problem and not feel fearful of repercussion, right? So our daughter, I remember she was in high school and she went out with some friends and she called us up to say that there had been some drinking going on and that she needed help. And she doesn't have to worry that when she gets home, we're going to, take away her driver's license or tell her she can't have a computer in her room or ground her or whatever else. We don't want her to be so afraid of what our reaction is going to be
that she's going to do something stupid or be in a situation that's not safe.
She allows herself to remain in a situation because she can't trust us with what she has done. And that is, I think, just about the worst way you can do it as a parent is to, and I apologize, I don't mean to judge other parents. We all make our own choices. But if your children are afraid to come to you when they need it most, then what are you there for?
What are you doing? Yeah. And it is not comfortable. I will tell you, it is definitely not the easiest thing to let your child do something that you don't think they should do, or to know that your child is doing something that they shouldn't do. But if you don't know, then they don't have anyone to go to, and things can go wrong in a heartbeat, and they don't have anyone to call. And I don't want my kids to ever be in that position. My parents may not have been perfect, but my parents did the same thing for me. They were always there if I needed help, if it was something I found myself in a stupid situation. My parents always supported me in that way and really helped to teach me how to be responsible.
And I think on the reverse side of that, my mother was a single mom for the bulk of my childhood. And, I will tell anybody, I will scream her praises to anyone who wants to hear it. My mother was an excellent mother. She made mistakes like anybody else, but she really set an environment where we felt mostly comfortable. The opposition to what Stacey was talking about with her parents is that while I knew that it wouldn't be the end of the world for me,
you were getting in trouble.
I was going to be, if I called my mom and said I'm in this situation, she would have come and gotten me and lectured me just like I would do to my own children. But once I got home, I know I'm probably not going out again for a while. And so I was afraid to tell my mother because I was afraid of the consequences. I didn't want to be in trouble. And as much as she was a wonderful mom, and Mom, I'm sorry if you're listening to this, but, I think that was the wrong way to do it.
Well, I think there's something to be said for consequences, right? There should be consequences to bad choices. But if that consequence is punishment and taking things away, then you make people want to hide it. It's a fear of, I'm in this situation now and I can't tell anybody.
This actually makes me think of this commercial. Yeah. Stacey and I actually decided on this topic after seeing this commercial. Yes. Now, that's been a while ago. We jotted it down as a future topic. But basically, and I'm not going to get it verbatim correct, but basically a kid comes into his parents' room and he's like kind of stumbling over his words. And he's like, so, it was nothing, not a big deal. The car's fine. Just a little tiny ding, but, there's a fender bender. And he's going through this little, trying to make it out like it's not a big deal story. And it's all played off as kind of fun and silly. And it's an insurance commercial. And the parents kind of hold their hand out. And the kid reluctantly tosses the keys. And then he's like, I don't remember the number, but he says something like a month. And they're like, yep. And he walks away. And I just thought, your kid I know it's a commercial. It's not true. But someone wrote this because it's realistic.
Because, it's
your
reality.
Kid had a minor accident. And they came to you to tell you. They didn't hide it. They didn't lie about what happened. They came in and said, look, it's fine. It's not a big deal. This thing happened. And the kid lost his driving privileges for something like 2 weeks or a month or whatever it was.
So you didn't teach him to do the right thing. You taught that kid in that moment. I know it's a commercial, but damn it. You taught the kid in that moment that even if you do the right thing, you'll be punished. And so children need to learn that there are punishments when they get older. I don't disagree. But punishing them when they're a child, when they need to learn, doesn't help teach them for the future anything other than don't fucking tell anybody when you screwed up. Hide it, because if I don't hide it, I'm going to get in trouble. What you want to teach your kids, I would hope, at least what I want to teach mine, is that you should know who your network is to help you when you're in a predicament. You should know where to go when you need help.
Well, I think a really important point to get to here is the punishments in the real world aren't like that. You don't get pulled over. I mean, unless you've done something really bad, you don't get pulled over and then have the cop say, like, do you know why I pulled you over? All right, well, you're going to have to hand over your keys. That's not how the real world works. So I think it's important that the punishments that you give to your children, the disciplinary actions you take, be as realistic as possible. So what might have been a good idea in that situation is, okay, hey, you need to understand that
your
regardless of whether
it's go up. You're going to have to help pay for it, right?
Regardless of whether or not it's completely your fault, there is a financial consequence of this action. So, it's a minor bump, $50. You're going to work that off around the house or pay it after your next paycheck. I mean, you can do something like that to try to drive home a point,
right,
about being careful on the road. But just this
teach
blanket
lessons, not punishment,
yes,
in our opinion. So that is what we really strive to do. And with taking in our nephews, we haven't talked a lot about that since we talked about it in the first episode. But, they don't understand when to ask for help because it's a new environment, right? So we want them to come to us. So we've had to explain all the scenarios of when we've been there for our children and when they've made mistakes and what the scenario is. And we're proving, through our actions that that's how things go. If you make a mistake or you do something wrong, here's the kind of punishment. Our punishment is talking.
Yeah,
it is explaining and understanding.
The worst punishment I will ever dish out is a lecture. Sometimes they can be a little forcefully worded.
And they can be a little long.
Well, hey, when your kid rolls their eyes, that's when you start the lecture over. But that's the thing is I'm not going to, unless they've done something that requires a lot more of a conversation, you know what I mean? I'm not taking anything away from them. I don't think that's helpful.
No. And, it gives us the opportunity to talk about things that might be seen as taboo, right? When we can have discussions around drugs and we can have discussions around drinking and things like that with our children so that they understand that it's not these terrible things, it makes it easier for them to come ask questions, right? We actually had to decline the sex education for our middle school nephew because it was all about abstinence only. And I'm not teaching my kids that shit.
There were two options, and I was like, oh, well, I'll check the one that's not abstinence only. One was abstinence only. The other was, what was the wording they used? It was like abstinence focused. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like,
so they were both shit.
So you're going to tell them that, yeah, we know people have sex, but you're also going to say, but still don't though.
Yeah.
Like that's not better. And I remember the counselor kind of looked at me funny when I was like, well, we're not allowing our kid to have any part in any of that.
Yeah. We'll teach them ourselves. Thank you very kindly.
We got this.
Again, if you haven't watched all of our episodes, we're in the Bible Belt. So, typical.
I was like, look, we have some home movies. No, I'm kidding. I think this is a good time to move on.
Yeah.
Do you? Okay,
sure.
Good. Going a little long, so I just want to make sure we kind of get to a point where we can wrap this up. So,
all right. So, time for our discussion about atheism. And this is a fun topic for me because I totally get this. Usually I'm like, yeah, whatever, John, you talk about your thing. But spiritual but not religious. So annoying.
So here's the thing. So annoying indeed. Here's the thing about people who are spiritual but not religious. I find myself truly struggling to despise their position because it is so much more liberal and progressive, generally speaking. What I find, though, is... thank you, Stacey, for sliding that mic away from my face because I was way too loud.
Ranting.
Once I get a little passionate, I tend to get loud. I think you'll find that from our first segment. So what was I talking about? Spiritual but not religious. Okay, gotta keep myself on track. The show is only so long. Here's the thing. and I said this, I'm just going to repeat it so I make sure I get my thought in there. I find myself struggling to really despise the position of the spiritual but not religious crowd, because they tend to be a little more leftist, a little more liberal and progressive, like me.
Yes.
And they tend to be accepting of the LGBT plus community.
They tend to be a little bit more open-minded and people you would want to maybe hang out with until.
Yeah. And so here's the thing. A lot of other people have said this. It's not a novel concept, but you take any religious person and you'll find that they cherry pick, right? So the spiritual but not religious crowd doesn't really have to worry about that, because typically they don't
cherry picked.
Well, they don't view holy books, typically anyway, as of major importance. I've met some who are spiritual but not religious, but will still call themselves Christians because they follow the teachings of Christ. But of course they don't, not really. So it's this kind of funny situation where it's like, I would rather you not take a literal view of the Bible, but if you're not doing that, I can't
Then
really
why?
figure out how you've come to any of your conclusions. So I want to give a really good example of why, in a way, I view the spiritual but not religious crowd as kind of worse than the Westboro disgusting, overly religious right-wing crowd. And worse is, relative. Yeah, I don't mean they're actually worse people. I think they're significantly better people.
More frustrating for us.
But here's the thing. So I had a friend once who we were kind of debating, kind of vaguely, not really a serious debate, just a discussion over Facebook Messenger about, God. And she was telling me that she just can't not believe in a God. So I was like, well, why? Like, what reason do you have for being unable to abandon this position? And she explained that she has just seen a higher power's influence on her life. She's, I applied to this school and got in, but I really, my grades weren't perfect, but I had these other things, and I prayed, and I try to reach out to the God that I believe in, and I feel that God doesn't discriminate against anybody, and that God comes in and just wants to help you and take care of you and lift you up.
Blah, blah, blah.
And she just kept going. And finally I said, so this isn't a Christ thing at all? She's like, no, I don't believe in that at all. I just think there's a God there who intervenes on our behalf. And I know this because he has consistently intervened on mine. So I just said, then why are there children starving to death? Why are there children dying in drone bombs the U.S. has sent over to the Middle East? Why isn't the God who made sure that
who intervenes in your college selection, right?
You, a person who lives in a relatively well-off country, who has access to healthcare, who's upper middle class, whose parents always had access to healthcare for you and put food on your table, that God has intervened on your already wonderful life's behalf.
And left all these other people to suffer.
Right. Isn't it interesting that God contributes proportionally based on your access to clean water and food? Isn't that interesting? And of course, she got kind of frustrated. And we haven't talked about it since. She's still a friend of mine. I would love to think that had some impact on her. But that's the problem, though. If you're going to say that the Bible is irrelevant, the Quran is irrelevant, if you're going to say any of these holy books don't matter, that there's just a God, then how can you possibly explain that God's inaction in other avenues? Because these Westboro Baptist Church people, they can point to Leviticus 18:22.
Yeah, they can say, I'm following this.
They can say this book says this. Now, don't get me wrong, they cherry pick too.
As disgusting as it is, at least they try to follow what their book says. This is what I believe, I'm going to do these things. As terrible as they are, at least they're sticking to something. People that don't stick to anything are just
frustrating.
Yes.
There's no positive explanation for all of the bad things if you don't believe some class of people are condemned for their bad choices, right?
Yeah.
Then you're just lying to yourself. And I find that tremendously dishonest. I think it's a very self-serving narrative,
It's very disappointing. It's very sad to see somebody that isn't religious but still thinks their mom is looking down on them from heaven, or that they're going to see somebody when they die. But I don't really believe in the whole God thing. I'm just spiritual. Well, then you just got to kind of give it up. Like, you either got to know that Santa Claus isn't real or believe in Santa Claus. And that's kind of how I attribute it. It's like, pick one. You know he isn't real. You said the book wasn't real. You said you don't believe what's in there because it's ridiculous. Then what makes you possibly think there's something else out there that fucking matters?
Yeah, because 99% of any discussion I've ever had, or 99% of all of the discussions I've ever had with theists, we'll just say Christians, in this case, just for the sake of simplicity. When I ask for evidence, they point to the Bible. When I tell them that's not evidence, they talk about personal testimony. Well, but your personal testimony isn't worth a damn if other people don't share that experience. Well, I guess that's probably enough ranting for this episode from me. So, as always, if you didn't already agree with me, I hope I gave you something to think about.
All right, so listener mail. We haven't gotten any in a while, so hopefully we'll hear from you guys. Maybe we sparked some conversation or some thoughts in today's discussion, so we'd love to hear from you. Of course, you can comment on YouTube. You can email us at Jon, that's Jon, at stayathomeatheist.com. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter by searching the Stay at Home Atheist. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And select the little bell, right?
Yeah, you got to ring the bell so you get those notifications. Not, do what you want.
Yeah. But listen to us next week. Or the week after.
As Bertrand Russell once said, the good life is one inspired by love and guided by knowledge. Thank you once again for joining us.
Till next time.
Thousands and thousands are humming, the second coming's coming. The environmental responsibility is succumbing to the suicidal longing for paradise. Can't they see it's already before our eyes? All that makes us who we are, we find cannot survive without our mind. But you're so afraid to die, you're willing